Today's itinerary is going to be about the Parenting University Crash Course. This is part of the parenting initiative that started in Achology. I'm trying to help blow Achology up with Kane's help. You know, he started this whole thing, and we want to try to move as many people over from PMP into Achology as possible. So if you're not a member of Achology, I think everybody here is, if I'm correct. You know, I encourage us to go out and spread the news, let everybody know that it's free, doesn't cost anything. And in that environment, we can do so much more. They're going to open up some training opportunities for us, and we can do more things like we're doing today. So let's spread the word and get people to sign up. And if you get into Achology, let them know that, you know, one of the things I'm doing is I'm offering my course for free for the first 100 Achologists that sign up or, you know, want to participate in this initiative. And we'll be doing these Zoom meetings to help supplement that course. Okay, so this first Zoom meeting is going to be about section 1. The first section is really just talking about, you know, the overview of the course, and you know, I'm introducing myself. But there are 2 lectures that I do want to cover that I think are important. And one of those is the lecture about loss. I shared a story about going to Disney World with my family and losing track of my oldest son, who was at the time about 3.5 years old. And I was scared to death. I mean, I'm in Disney World, and I don't know if you guys have ever been to one of these huge theme parks, but there are just, it seems like millions of people all around. And, you know, he took off around the corner to go do number 2 in his diaper. And the reason he did that is because every time he would go, his face would get like beet red. He would just get super bright red. And his mother would tease him about it. And he got kind of, you know, guilty or shamed about it or whatever he was feeling. He wasn't feeling comfortable to be making faces around us. So he just darted off around a corner somewhere and did his business. And we lost track of him. But, you know, the good news was that we found him in pretty quick order. But during that time he was gone, I'm telling you, it felt like a million years. So my question to you guys is, have you ever lost momentarily your child? And what does that feel like?
I can share.
Yeah, please do.
So when, like my youngest son, Tyler, he was actually born in the Cayman Islands when we lived there for 4 years. And we had a nanny there. Then when we moved back to Canada, we found a nanny here. So she was new to us, but came highly recommended. We lived out with my parents for the first couple months while like our place was closing. And so she stayed out with us. So we gained this trust of her abilities. But when we moved to the city, I don't know, kind of long story short, her behavior changed over the course of a weekend. I don't know if like she got into drugs or whatever in the long run, but long story short, one day I'm an hour away at work, and their dad, he was up, you know, he worked from home, was working, and she had our younger son out, and I get a phone call, and she was just like crying and telling me she's sorry. That she's sorry, and she just wanted her kids. She has one child back in, you know, Hong Kong or wherever she's from. She just wanted her kids to be happy. She just wants her kids to be happy. And it's like, well, what kids are you talking about? And anyway, she put out my kids' 2 names. So like even now I'm going to start bawling because it's like that. Like I thought I was never going to see my son again, and there's just no explanation for that, you know? And yeah, so basically I tried to get her to make sense of what was going on, and I was helpless. Like I couldn't even breathe, like I'm an hour away, didn't even know where she was in the city. He didn't know where she was. And she hung up. And I swear to God, I died inside. And I kept calling, and finally got her back on the phone, and she was just monotone calling out his name. And all of a sudden, a lady in the background was saying, "Hey, you need to put that down. You need to get out of here." And so I got authoritative, which I'm not like that at all. But she just wasn't coherent, wasn't making sense. So I'm like, "Annabelle, give that lady your phone. Give it to her right now. And she listened. So the lady answered the phone, and I'm like, I don't know who you are, but that's my son. Like, don't let him go. Like, hold on to him. And they were only blocks away from our house, right? I'm still traumatized by it, right? So yeah, it's crazy. It's insane. But and the long story short, I never really found out what went on. It took about 7 hours to get her out of our place, packed her up, took her to where she was renting, fired her, obviously. And she, again, just wasn't making sense and whatnot. But and then so our son, he was only like maybe 2.5 or something, really small, could hardly talk, and he was talking about a bus ride and then spraying water, and it was funny. So the lady who was saying, "Hey, you guys got to go," what happened is she was hiding around the house, and he took their their hose with the sprayer and was spraying their house. And so he was telling us what they did. So where she went on a bus ride with our kid, I don't even know, right? So
Wow, that's an amazing,
powerful story.
terrifying story, actually.
Yeah.
So, what if we could wrap it up in one emotion? What was the emotion?
Terrified.
Yeah, and that's an example of something that we hope never happens. But when we do lose our kid, even if it's in a shopping mall, which I've lost all 4 of my kids. I got 4 kids, and at some point in time, I've lost one of them. I lost when we were on a tour in Germany, and everybody's got to get back to the buses, and I can't find my son, and I'm like, okay, I guess we're gonna not get on the bus. And had we made that choice, he would have taken off because he had already gotten on the bus and was just kind of hiding under a seat or something. And like, so there were a few of us. So some of us got on the bus and found him, and then we all got back together. But for a few minutes, we were like running all over this memorial place that we were stopping and looking at, and couldn't find him, screaming his name, and we were just, again, terrified, losing him somewhere far away from where we live. So the point is that fear is one of those things that we as parents have to deal with from time to time. It's not anything we want to deal with, but we're going to be faced with these issues that'll scare us. And maybe it might be as traumatic as what Karen had described, or something like I had gone through. But it could be even something more simple, where we're just simply disconnecting from our children. They're not responding to what we want from them. They're acting out, and we can't seem to connect with them for whatever reason. We're losing them mentally. We're losing them emotionally. And this can be just as terrifying to us, just on a different level, not as so extreme, but it can go in cycles. We can be dealing with this over and over and over again. And so one of my missions for this course was to look at that. What's causing that? What happens most of the time when we're losing connection with our children? And that is that we just don't know how to communicate with them. They don't know how to communicate with us. And that we don't have to get lost. We don't have to get disconnected. That we can create tighter and more powerful bonds with our kids. And what we're going to do in this course is we're going to teach you how to go about creating those bonds through different types of communication, and just getting on their level and understanding where their mindset's at. Because we were once children ourselves, but the reality is we don't think like children any longer. And if we want to understand them, we need to remember how they think and get on their level again. So we're going to get into much greater detail later in the course about that. And I want to sort of wrap up that part of it, but I want to welcome Yvette. How are you? Glad.
Hi, I'm good. I do have my daughter at home with me today, so it just depends on how much she will let me participate. You can probably see her over here.
Oh, super. Oh, you had a couple of them there. All right.
Okay, well, one's a dolly.
Oh, one's a dolly. Okay, yeah, with the glass. I need my glasses. Yeah. Okay, one's animated and the other one's not.
Yeah. So I might have to rush off and watch the playback, but we'll see how much she lets me participate.
Super. So does anybody else have any questions about this concept of losing your child, whether physically or just emotionally or mentally? Can we relate to this in any way? Melanie, do you have something that you might want to add to, have you ever been lost yourself, you lose your child, or maybe just feeling sort of disconnected from family?
Yeah, I've lost my son. I've lost him in shopping center, but it was literally not even for a minute. But as Karen was saying, your heart just sinks and you panic. It's, as I say, it seemed like an hour, but it was probably less than a minute before I actually found him. And he was only about 2. He was so tiny, he had ducked behind some clothes and I couldn't see him. And I immediately rushed out of the store because I just panicked. I thought, if he gets too far, I'm not going to find him. So I immediately went out of the store and then worked my way back. And he was probably about 4 feet from where I left him, sitting there on the floor, playing with some clothes he'd pulled off of the rack. And
so he didn't even know that you were missing.
Oh no, he hadn't missed me at all. No, he was quite happy. He was quite happy. So yeah, but it's a very frightening experience. Very, very frightening.
Yeah. How about you, Abdi? Any experiences like that?
No, Donnie, I only have one, so it's really hard to lose.
Well, that's what I thought when I only had one. But they move pretty quick. If you take your eye off them for a second, they get disappear on you. But
usually when we go out, my wife and I are sort of like helicoptering them, so she doesn't go far.
Okay, that's good. All right, so
Donnie, it's like that was an old story of mine. How today I kind of feel like lost is to electronics. So part of aging to they want to be with their friends. So that's that transition where there's a different role for mom in their life.
Yeah.
But also too, with just all this zoning out, it seems like a constant battle to be taking it out of their hands just to get them coherent and to be able to communicate. And then at that point, now they're mad or frustrated or, because they want their game, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That those are live and well issues that, ever evolving. Who knows what tomorrow's technology will bring that will create an even greater issue for us as we try to parent. I just want to say one final thing about loss is that our children themselves are going to feel lost, and we need to be mindful of that. Even though we might not lose sight of them, oftentimes they lose sight of us and they feel afraid. We might be in eye shot of them, but they can't see us, and they get filled up with fear. And I want to mention this because emotion is the first language that we all learn. Prior to our linguistic language, this is the language that we learn. And we're going to talk more about that later in the course, but fear is one of these things that we all experience at some point in time. And it's something that our children are going to experience, and we need to learn how to deal with it. Okay, so that's just sort of get us opened up here and, talking at the emotional level. And now I want to switch it over to the left brain now and talk about another lecture in this first section, which really is a process of learning. We're all going to have a method of parenting. In fact, I think the best way to go about doing this, I'm going to share with you my screen. I have a bunch of slides I'm going to share with you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to open this up. This lecture is called the method cycle, or the method wheel, and the method change cycle. And really, this has not everything to do with parenting, but everything to do with life. Everything we do in life starts off with not knowing. Okay, one of the suppositions that we learn in NLP is that you don't know what you don't know. And we're not born knowing anything. So we have to learn things, and there's a process. And one of the things that happens when we go through this process, we're attempting to learn, and we want to have a change, so we get a little frustrated and impatient with it. And I think it's important for us to understand what these actual steps are in this process, so we become a little more lenient on ourselves. We're not so tough on ourselves, because we want all the answers now, especially when it comes to our children. We want the answers now. We don't want them tomorrow, but everything takes time. And as long as we have this cycle in our mind and we understand what's happening, I think it will help us transition from the way we're currently parenting to the more preferred way of parenting. So the cycle's like this. You're going to have your method of parenting, and that's going to come from how you were parented or what you learned from trial and error, or maybe you received some kind of training. But basically, it's just going to be practice, practice, practice on whatever it is that you don't know that you're just doing, right? And then things will change, or they won't. So it's going to be consistent or inconsistent, underdeveloped, evolving, habitual, subconscious, reactive, robotic. It could be any of these things, but we all have our own method of parenting. We have a unique style, okay? So when we look at the parenting method, I like to look at it kind of like a wheel on a bicycle. And every day we're getting a little further down the road, and our children are getting a little bit older. Throughout the day, this wheel is made up of the different roles that we perform as parents. Okay, we all have these different roles, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. Within those roles, there are these tasks that we must do within those roles. So, for example, the roles would be the creator role, the provider role, the nurturer role, the buddy role, the coach role, the governor role, and the model role. And if you have more than 2 kids, or 2 or more kids, you assume the role of the referee as well. Okay, so these are all the different roles that we play as parents, and we need to perform them all relatively well. Otherwise, our method is going to get a little messy, and it's not going to be as effective as we'd like. Now, we further look at our methods, and we break them down into different tasks. And one example would be your role as provider. You go to work, you're paying the living expenses, buying groceries, paying for the electric bill, and all these things, right? In order to be good at this task, you got to keep your job, right? You got to balance the budget. You got to pay things on time. If you're not doing those things, you're not performing that role very well, and you're putting your family at risk. Okay, so this is one of the roles. So I look at us individually with wheels that look something like this. That some areas we're going to be strong at, we'll be masterful with those tasks, and those roles we'll be good at. But there's going to be some areas that we're really weak, or we're just completely inept. We fail on those tasks, and it ends up damaging the role that we perform. And this reflects on our children, and it reflects on our method and our ability to parent. Now, I'm using this parenting idea, but this is true with any endeavor we take in life. If you're talking about the task at work, the roles you play at work, it's all the same stuff. You're either good at some things or you're not. And what we want to do is look at those areas that we're weak and see if we can make them better. All right, so ultimately our wheel's going to look like this as we move forward. Now, what we want to do is look at one of these areas where we're not, very efficient at, and we want to start making some change to it. And this is where the method change cycle comes in. We want to take something that's kind of weak and start growing and getting better and better and better at it. And the method change cycle is a 6-step process. Now, the good news is that we don't need to get to step 6 before we start seeing some real effective change in life. 6 represents mastery. Okay, we don't need to become masters in anything. All we need to do is get to step 3. Okay, so that's the good news. And that only takes, maybe take minutes. Could take minutes and maybe a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And you can immediately start having change in your life. So if there's an issue in parenting that we're going to cover in this course that you identify that you need to work on, and we start working on it, just understand that, it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's not going to take forever, but you have to be a little bit patient with it. And you don't need 3 years to become a master. You just need a couple of weeks maybe to really start to have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to effectively change. So let's look at these steps. The first step is what we call unconsciously incompetent. This basically means you're unaware that you're inept. You don't really know that you're not doing a good job. You're just going about doing what you're doing. And a lot of us, when it comes to parenting, because nobody's ever gone to parenting university and our parents weren't professors at parenting, they just taught us via their demonstration in life, they're going to teach the way they teach and demonstrate what they demonstrate, and we're going to have an experience. And that experience is going to go one of two ways. It's going to be bad, confusing, and wrong, or it's going to be okay, good, or great. And if it's good, okay, or great, there's no reason to change anything, so we're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And it might be that our let's say, discipline techniques, while they're effective when they're really young, we don't know that the long-term effects are going to damage them, and we won't see that until way down the road when they become defiant. That would be an example. So we're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over. But as soon as we have an experience that we determine is wrong, bad, or confusing, questions occur. And we have a choice. We can keep going down the same path, or we can elect to try and find some new information. Now, when we decide to go the new information route, we're going to cross a bridge. It's going to take us to the next step. Okay? And that next step is becoming consciously incompetent. This is the scariest step. When we finally realize that I don't know what I'm doing, that's a scary step. That's like feeling lost. And that's why I had that first lecture before this one, because this is where a lot of people start this course at, feeling lost. I don't know what I'm doing. I've tried this, that, and the other thing, and it's not working. My kids are still behaving in a way I don't want them to behave. And now they're looking for help. And the process moving forward is learning, trying out what you've learned, putting in some effort, checking it out. And if it's still not sinking in, you go back to learning. If it starts to work out, you may have to correct and modify, but then we're crossing this bridge called learned. Okay? From there, we're going to move into a term that I created called consciously Con Competence. Con meaning with. So we're going to do this with some competence. Not that we're already competent, because we're not doing this in our sleep yet. We still need some help. So there's another process. We're going to start practicing. We may need a coach or somebody to help us. And everything that we do is going to be step by step by step thinking. So think about baking a cake or trying out a new recipe. The first time you do it, you're going to be looking at the recipe and checking it out and going, okay, I added this, and now I stir that, and then I mix in this. And this is how the process is in the beginning. But eventually, you'll do it enough times to where you don't have to think about steps 1, 2, and 3. They just kind of all mash together into one big chunk, and we call this chunk thinking. And for the first time, you're really obtaining knowledge, because knowledge is organized information, and you have really organized information, and it's starting to sink in. So this is the stage where you can have change. This is step 3. You can actually start working with your child and changing, your parenting method and seeing some results right here at this stage. Okay, so moving forward, we would have what's called consciously competent, and that's just meaning that we are getting closer and closer to understanding. All that chunk thinking becomes flash thinking. We're not even really doing much thinking anymore. We're just sort of doing. And the only difference is that we'll make mistakes, and that will be what causes us to stop. We'll go, oh, I made a mistake. Then we may have to go back and look at the cheat sheet, if you will, or look at our references or sources and go, okay, what was that again? And then, we're back in the sync. So now we're at understanding. The next level of that, of step 5 rather, is in unconsciously competence, or we can call this subconscious competence. In NLP, we call this sort of meta-programming, where it comes out of the conscious state and we're just doing things sort of automatically because we've done it enough, okay? And if we want to become masters, what's going to be required is to put in a lot of time, and approximately that time is about 10,000 hours according to all the experts in mastery. And if we do that, then we get to step 6, optimum performance. All right, and if we want to stay there, we need to keep practice, keep learning, keep gaining experience, and don't become complacent. Because if we get complacent, suddenly we start slipping back and we can end up all the way back on square one. Okay, so that's going to wrap up this particular lecture, and I want to open it up to you guys, since my voice is getting a little sore. And I want to see what you guys think about the cycle and how we could apply it to our everyday life as well as to our parenting. So who'd like to jump in? Is it a bit overwhelming? Does it make sense?
The theory makes sense. Applying it to my life is taking me time. I used to be unconsciously incompetent in a lot of things. Actually, most of life, I was just on autopilot. Then I went through the consciously incompetent, where I knew that I really knew nothing at all. So it's more working into that, being conscious and working with it. The trial and error, it's almost like your life, you're kind of like is an experiment, right? So now I kind of take the approach when something is bothering me. Like I get triggered and then, whatever, act on autopilot. But then when I realize that that's the case, I kind of like, okay, what can I try? So I look for things that I can apply, and I look at it, I kind of remove myself from the emotional standpoint of it and use more the like, let's see what this does. Let's see what that does,
Right. Because you're getting lessons from, not just from professors and books and courses, but you're getting lessons from life. Mm-hmm. And those are probably the ones that really sink in. Experience is the best professor, they say, right? So this also applies to our children. So when we're perhaps getting frustrated with our children and we're trying to teach them something new, they're behaving in a wrong way, and they've been behaving incorrectly for a while, and we're trying to teach them a new way of behaving, they're going to go through these processes as well. So we need to be patient with them and don't expect that immediately their behavior is going to change, because they're going to go from really operating in this unconsciously incompetent way because they don't know what they're doing, and to you trying to correct them, and then suddenly it starts to make sense that, oh, I'm doing something wrong, and they got to go through the emotional part of it. And then as you try to teach them how to do it right, there's some time involved. So I think this cycle really sort of illustrates what happens in our minds all the time. And if we're aware of this, then we will likely operate a little bit differently. Let's go at let me put Yvette on the spot here. How is this method cycle process register with you?
With me?
Yeah.
So at the moment, I mean, Amelia's only 2. So at the moment, it's trial and error for me. We're very much in a we're just starting to do the potty training at the moment. So that's an experience, should I say? For example, I don't know how much people want to know about that, but there was a bit of an accident on the floor this morning with a poo on the floor. She'd sat on the potty for about half an hour and refused to go potty, and then as soon as she stood up, did a poop on the floor. And I was just like, what do I do with that? Do you know what I mean? Like, so I was like, oh, never mind, baby, we'll put it in the potty and then go flush it in the toilet so she knows that's where it's supposed to go. But part of me was like, she knew it was supposed to go there, So
yeah.
It's kind of trial and error at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's it. She's used to doing it a certain way for her whole life, and now transitioning to this idea. I got to go sit on this contraption here, and we have to be patient with that, and say, okay, it's going to take some time for her to understand the way to do it.
Thank you, baby. And just a lot of positive reinforcement. Absolutely. So when she's doing really good with things, so a lot of positive reinforcement. So at the moment she's learning to drink out of a cup without a bottle, so sort of like free flow like this. So I'm letting her drink out of my cup. So when she puts it down gently, I'll say, thank you, well done. And so it's like positive reinforcement to let her know that she's done well, rather than slamming it and it kind of going everywhere. Well done, baby. Very good.
have you learned, or have you read the book of the Love Languages?
Sorry?
Have you read the book Love Languages?
I've not actually. I've heard of it though. It's something that is on
Okay.
on one of my lists.
All right, stay tuned because that's part of what I offer in this course. So
Yeah.
further Zoom meetings, I'll be covering all that. And really, it's ideal to learn your child's love language, because while you're doing a lot of great things, and I applaud you for that, you're being very progressive, and while you're saying good, you're telling her good things. If, for example, let's say her love language was touch, a hug might be what really registers.
Oh, I see.
See what I'm saying? So we just need to figure out what really registers well with our children, so that when we're trying to reward them and give them good, positive feedback, we're giving them the information in the way they want to receive it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but we're going to talk about that later in the course in another Zoom meeting down the way. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. And no, it wasn't too descriptive. I have some more stories I could share that would definitely be too descriptive.
Yeah, I mean, we've only just started, so I'm just hoping that, well, I know it is going to get easier and it's going to get better, but it's all, going to take time. It's going to take time. So it's the same as like when we started with weaning, everything was spat out at first, and it's just the next stage.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing. That was awesome. Abdi, you have some input for us.
Yeah, what, actually becoming aware of this concept of change itself is really been very empowering. So now I'm not going to beat myself up knowing that I'm going through this process and I'm somewhat incompetent. And then also I have this little bit of fear, and it's something that I'm well aware of and conscious of it. Part of becoming a competent parent, is it possible sometimes the kids came to the universe hardwired in certain ways, and we're trying to correct that, and by pushing them in a direction that they're not wired, we could just stay incompetent forever and not understanding their gift or whatever we're going to call it.
Absolutely. I believe there's a nature and nurture component to the whole process. So there may be some genetic aspects. And I do think that as parents, we probably destroy a good part of a child, because of the way that we've been conditioned. They come in very free and open to the world, and suddenly we start teaching them to become limited, and things are like this, and this is the way it is. And we're really kind of destroying a lot of their creativity by the rules that we place on them. So yeah, it's like taking a beautiful piece of clay that has all this potential, and then we're going to decide how we're going to mold it, and we're not letting them have any decision on that. And that's part of the problem. And hopefully when we get through this course, if that's the mindset that we have as parents, we will change that mindset, because it really is a journey together. We're just guiding them because we have more wisdom. But they really have to learn early on empowerment and choice. And we don't need to stymie that. We need to encourage that, because that's what's really going to get them by. Our mission is to create a human being that is independent and sustainable and capable of thriving in life. And if we don't do everything in our power to do that, we're failing them. And unfortunately, most of us fail our kids because we're too busy trying to mold them in the way that we believe they need to be molded. And we're taking away their creativity and their power. And they end up filled with fear because, that's not the way it works. We all want to be independent and free. So how about you, Melanie? Has this method change cycle registered with you in any sort of way?
Yeah, I think breaking down the job of a parent into roles and looking at tasks individually is going to be really helpful. Already I'm kind of identifying areas that perhaps I need to work on. I recently separated with the children's father. So immediately I'm saying, when you mentioned the governor role, for example, that was a role that their father took on more than myself. So, it's a new role for me, having to learn, how to discipline them, because that was, okay, yeah, I was involved in discipline, but not in such a, and now it's all kind of on me to set new rules and boundaries. So I think it's going to be really helpful, actually breaking everything down and looking at everything individually and where the strengths and weaknesses are.
Super. Yeah, later in the course, I actually break down each of these roles and I go into great detail. And so you'll get a lot out of it when we get to that point in the course. Yeah, when you go from a co-parenting, situation to single parenting, suddenly, all the roles can fall into your lap. And if you've been in a marriage for a while and been doing things a certain way, in the traditional sense, and I'm not saying I agree with this way, but in the traditional sense of things, going back to, if we measure all of history, the man has been the provider and the woman has been the nurturer, and and the governor tends to fall on dad, and so there's all these different roles, that 8 different roles, and culturally speaking, or just traditionally speaking, the genders have sort of split up these roles. But it's really important that even if you're in a co-parent relationship, that you understand and participate in all of these roles, because God forbid somebody dies. I mean, it happens. You may be in a happy marriage, but I could walk out in the street and get hit by a bus tomorrow, and my wife's going to have to take up all the roles, right? Which she does. She knows all the roles, and I know all the roles, and we can, pass the baton back and forth with no problem. So it's really important that even if you're in a healthy, happy relationship, that you bring your co-parent in and have them watch the course with you and say, hey, we got to work on this together. Because there is a place later in the course where I talk about the parenting plan. And it is where the parents get together and there's a meeting of the minds on, what are we going to break, the distribution of tasks, who's going to do what, and when are we going to start exchanging it. There has to be an agreement, because what happens a lot of times in parents is that one parent suddenly becomes the good guy and the other one becomes the bad guy. And the kids will run to one parent to try to get what they want. And if they don't get it from there, they go to the other one. And suddenly the parents are fighting over something, dealing with the kids, because they're not in agreement. And children are pretty smart, and they will use their parents against each other to get what they want. There's a stage when they're about 6 to 9 years old, we call the imperial child. And this is really where these kids really figure out how to manipulate their parents. And they will cry for no reason because they know they're going to get what they want, or they will lie and say things because they're in this manipulation mode. And so we need to be mindful of these different stages and these different roles, and we need to all operate to some proficiency in each and every one of these roles. And, going through the process of the change cycle is going to help us as we improve in those areas that we need work in. Like you said, Melanie, you may need some work in the governing role. Be patient with yourself, because you got to go through all of these steps, and you're going to make some mistakes, and that's okay, because you'll learn from them, and you'll just get better every time. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and a step back. It's just sort of the way it is. And sometimes it's 2 steps forwards and 3 steps back. But if we do it long enough, we'll definitely make some progress. And let's see. I think you talked about it, right, Karen? The method change cycle. I think we got everybody involved. Anybody else have any questions about what's happening so far in the course, or just any questions in general about parenting that you may have had coming in?
I have one, Don.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So part of the course, you ask who's involved in your child's or children's life.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about this one thing for the last 4 days and couldn't really answer it. And that was, so I listed the usual, the mom, dad, teachers, aunts, and uncles. What about the media and the internet. Could we say they are involved actually, and so we're just not aware of it?
Absolutely.
And I wasn't really sure if I can make that, saying they are, media's involved in my child's life. I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. How old are your children?
She's only 7, but it surprises me all the things that she talks to me about after she watches a movie or cartoon.
Yes. Yes. Well, just so everybody understands that, I'm going to ask the age of your child, and your answer is going to likely be the chronological age. But there is another age, which we don't really operate by in society, and this is really what I call the developmental age, or the maturation age. And in general, a maturation age can be anywhere from 3 years to one side or the other side of the actual chronological age. So a 7-year-old child could actually be operating and functioning more like a 10-year-old to one extreme. And on the other extreme, it could be operating more or less like a 4-year-old. And it doesn't mean in all areas. It could be that in some ways they're acting like a 10-year-old, in other areas they're acting like a 4-year-old. So you could be all over the place. And so we need to be mindful of the fact that even though we're going to talk about stages later in the course, there's a lot of flexibility there. And so a 7-year-old child may be greatly influenced by social media or, video games or cartoons or what we call children's network channels and all this kind of stuff. And I've been aware of like these channels that are really targeting children for quite a while, like the Disney Channel, for example. Hannah Montana and all of these characters that my children grew up watching the interaction myself, looking at what they're watching, I quickly learned to realize that the message that's being delivered to them is that parents are stupid and that they are the authority figure. And my daughter at one point started saying, "Talk to the hand." I'm like, whoa, okay, let's see. What are we going to do about that, right? So what I did about it was I sat and watched and see, I needed to see what was influencing her. Okay, it's that show. Okay, what other shows do you like to watch? I like these other shows. Okay, so we're going to watch these other shows that don't teach this message in favor of that one. And when she gets a little bit older, we can have a little discussion about, what Hannah Montana is really all about and what this message is all about. So what we can do is, look at everything. And that's a great point, Abdi, that TV, books, if your children are really into it, they could be influenced by it. But a lot of the behaviors are really going to be more things that they pick up that we model. Like, words, the accent that they use, how they sit in a chair, how they hold a fork and knife, and all these sorts of things. These subtle things that we might look at and go, why are you saying that word? Where did you come up with that word? This is what we want to be mindful of. And usually that's something that they've actually seen in real time. But, the internet makes everything kind of real time anymore. So that's an excellent point, Abby. One of the influencers can most definitely be the internet, cartoons, any sort of media. So if we're finding that these influencers, whether it be technical influencers or actual real people influencers, are affecting our children in a negative way, it's our job to sort of, fix the environment for them so it's more conducive to a positive experience versus creating an environment where they're going to learn some behaviors that just aren't going to be permitted in life. Did that answer your question, Abdi?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes.
Okay, that's good. You're thinking outside the box. I mean, I didn't put that in my course, and you just gave me an idea of an update. I should add something like that. It's a great point. So anybody else have any just sort of general parenting questions that we might can answer? We have I wanted to go to 3 o'clock. We got about 7 more minutes before 3. So I'm free to open to any questions.
I had a question.
Okay, super.
What do you do about kids that are potentially a bit of a bad influence, or parents that have like a different idea about what's acceptable behavior and what's not?
I think that the real telling tale here is you have to be very observant of your child to see if they're actually picking up on these things, because we can get overly protective trying to, keep them from this and keep them from that. But if it's not really registering with them, they won't pick up on it. Influencers are people that are actually impacting them, that they're actually imprinting upon our child and affecting behaviors. So there may be let's say you have an uncle who's cursing. He comes over and he just, every other word's a curse word, and you don't want your child saying these words. But it just goes in one ear and out the other, and the child never ever says this. Well, he's not an influencer. He's just somebody that's in their life, and they may care for this person, but they're not really having an impact on him. So it's up to us to kind of really watch their behavior, and if we're seeing that unacceptable behavior, and we can match it up with these influences in their life, then we need to step in and do something about it. Otherwise, the idea of trying to check every single thing that they're doing, that's we're never going to do that. You just not enough hours in a day.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is at the moment is there's this other 2-year-old girl that she plays with quite a lot, who lives across the road, and she's a really nice girl, but her mum's quite sort of laissez-faire. Like, she doesn't really kind of pull her up on a lot of stuff. And so I think Amelia kind of thinks it's okay to do a lot of the same things, and so now she's kind of started acting out a bit more, that she's been hanging around, or I've obviously been hanging around with the mum more, and the kids have been hanging out together more. But I'm not really sure what to do about it, because they're neighbours, and yeah, baby. And I suppose we've got kind of sort of different parenting styles.
Right.
So I don't know, things like, we were in a coffee shop today, and the kids started running around, and my automatic response was, Amelia, no running around the coffee shop. Come and sit back down, finish your cake, because we're having coffee and cake. And no, baby. No. And but she didn't say anything to her daughter. But then it's like, if one child is allowed to run around and the other one isn't, then they're both going to do it, because the other one's not going to stop. So then they both kind of carry on running around,
right.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot to unpack in that whole scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. I mean, first of all, she's very young, and she's kind of sampling at this point. So, if you took her to a park and there was another kid behaving, a little more orderly, she might fall in line with that. At this point, I don't think you're going to have to be too concerned about a permanent disposition taking place. It's just kind of, she's in the moment, so she's going to be, in the moment with this other person. They're connecting, and they're sharing. And so sorry,
do you think maybe the idea would be to take them somewhere, just a different place then, where it's okay for them just to run around and
absolutely
that's free?
That's the key. Rather than trying to create rules for them, which goes against their nature, by the way. They're designed to move. Kids want to move. They need to move.
Yeah.
And trying to get them to sit still.
You want Dolly?
is really going against their nature. So yeah, I would like, let's take them to the park or someplace where they can run around while we enjoy coffee together, and not just sit in the coffee house or wherever you're at trying to make everybody, you know. So I think that might be the you know, sort of a common ground compromise solution. You can have your time with your friend, and they can have their time with each other.
Yeah, that's probably the best
idea.
So I think she kind of thinks, oh well, they're only two, like just let them run around, you know. And I'm kind of like, well, it's kind of bothering everyone else, you know. It's not cool. But I think she's just laissez-faire and doesn't really think it's a problem. Whereas I do, and I don't like to bother other people and have other people offended. So I think maybe I'll suggest that next time and just say, oh well, why don't we take them to the park and get takeout coffee? You know.
Excellent.
So that's probably a good idea.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Aye, cheeky monkey. This little one's going wild now.
Yeah, so he doesn't want to sit still. You got a ball back.
She's just had her lunch, and so I think she's ready to go play. I might take her down the beach.
That's a good idea. I think she's raring to go. I have a daughter, 15, and she's a sports. She loves sports, and she's never ever been able to sit still ever in her life.
Oh, this one, she's like that. I think that's what part of it. Like she just loves. She's got so much energy, and she just loves to run around as well. So
now you got your hands full there.
Yeah, I think I am going to put her in dance school soon. Okay, baby.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing.
Right, okay, well, thank you very much for the tip, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're operating in the right way, trying to find a happy solution for everybody, and that's the way to go about it.
Yeah, she's starting to climb on me now, so I'd better go.
Time to go to the playground, out to the beach.
Yeah, time to go to the beach, I think.
All right. Well, take care.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye, baby.
And maybe I'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay. All right, bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
I've been there, the 2-year-old. It's been a long time. And yeah, they call it the terrible twos. They're you gotta be willing to get up and run around, because that's all they want to do is run around. So anybody else have any questions about parenting in general, or anything related to the course?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Donnie. I've got a son and a daughter, 10 and 11, and I sometimes feel I have their character is very, very different. And I sometimes feel I have to have 2 different parenting styles, but I'm trying to keep things fair and treat them the same. But I have this kind of conflict because they have different motivators. I have to discipline them differently. Some things aren't effective with one child that are with the other. And I find this sort of conflicting, and I get, and then sometimes the children pick up on it as well. Yeah, like, why are you treating me different? But they're so different in character, and one's a girl, one's a boy. It's hard sometimes, I find, to treat them exactly the same.
That's a challenge, obviously. I've 4 different children, and all 4 of them are different. And I've coached probably at least 1,000 kids in my life, and they all have a little bit something different. You can't, there's no one way to raise all children. You have to, later in the course, you're going to see there's a section called rigid flexibility. So there's this, you have to be flexible in some ways, and you got to be rigid in other ways. And the rigidness, I mean, they're old enough now that at the end of the course, there's a section called the Family Constitution. And really what that is just, it talks about the rules of the household that everybody's going to follow. And we're going to have a little round table discussion, and we're going to create our constitution. We're going to do this, and if we don't do this, this is the consequence. And everybody's going to agree to it. Okay, so it takes the emotion out of it. So somebody breaks a rule, and you're not having to go all, bonkers over it, right? You're just like, oh, okay, well, Charlie, you broke the rule. What happens now? They know it, and they deal with it. So that's how you can get kind of fairness at play. But when you're actually communicating with them, they're going to have their individual language. So mom's going to have to learn 2 languages in some degree, some way. And when you get to the love language section of the course, it may be just that, you know, one of them has a certain love language, and you have to learn that language to speak maybe to your daughter, and your son has a different love language, and you have to speak that language to him. And suddenly all these problems will start to disappear. You know, it might be that one of them wants more of your attention, and another one just wants more results. And you can't, that's not going to be equal, right? You can't equate a lot of attention and time to having something, you know, an active service or something that's result oriented. It's not an equal comparison. But in their minds, because at 10 and 11, there's a good chance they're still seeing things kind of in boxed ways and in linear perspective, that they're going to think anything that's done differently than the way it should be is the wrong way. There's no gray area.
Yeah, I think my daughter, yeah, she's still very much, yeah, she's the one I had more problems with emotionally. She thinks I spend, you know, I give more attention to her brother, and she'll get jealous. And
well, maybe she's a quality time. Maybe that's her love language. So maybe you just need to hang out with her a little bit more. You know, you don't even need to have an agenda. Just, hey, let's hang out, you know, walk in the park together, or silence, you know, spend some time together. So what I would ask, you know, if you want, you go ahead and jump to that part of the course, and in the question, you could ask them independently of one another. Take them aside and ask your son, how do you know when I love you? How do you know I love you? And listen to their response. He'll tell you, I love it when you spend time with me, or I love it when you bring me these things, or I love it when you fix things that are broken, or I love it when you give me a hug, or I love it when you say these wonderful things to me. So depending on how they respond, you're going to get some indication on how it is they want to feel love. And then you can tailor your communication with them accordingly. And then you do the same thing with your daughter. Ask the same question. There's a good chance you're going to get completely different answers. And that's that'll help you a lot. And then, of course, remember, you got to plug it into this method change cycle. It's not going to happen overnight. So it's just going to be something you have to work with. But I think that'll help a lot. So please, you know, look at that part of the section. I'll try to, between next time and this time and next time, I'll look it up and give you specifically which lecture to look at.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Brilliant.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Super. Any other questions?
Donnie, just a quick question. What is your preferred method of feedback, just in case as we take in the course that we want to give you feedback or ask questions or something like that?
Well, in the Udemy platform, there's a place for feedback. You can, you're following me on Achology, so you can reach out to me there. That works. And even in the PMP group, if you want to send me a messenger and private message me, I'll acknowledge you as a friend, and we can work that way as well. So I'm open to any of those options.
Cool. Okay,
and that goes to anybody and everybody. If you want to send me private messages or whatever, that's fine. I'm good with that. Or if you want to use the PMP the Facebook platform or the Achology platform, those would probably be the quickest routes, because if you go through Udemy, I don't get those messages every single day, and I kind of like to wait for them to pile up a little bit and then just go and attack them all at once. So if you need something answered right away, I would use the instant messaging route or the Achology route.
Great.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to try to do this every Tuesday. We'll work on section 2 next Tuesday of the course. And of course, you guys are invited to the meeting on Thursday if you want to attend that. That's going to be hosted by Karen and myself about back to school and the issues revolving around that. Okay. Anybody have any final words?
Well, thanks, Donnie.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie.
Thank you.
I'm
Bye.
glad to be of service, and look forward to seeing you guys next week.